Okay, the first material is about theories of child language acquisition. There are several experts who argue about language acquisition. The first is Burrhus Frederick Skinner. The second is Noam Chomsky. The third is Jean Piaget. And the last is Jerome Bruner. Okay, I'm going to explain it one by one. The first is behaviorism theory that proposed by Burrhus Frederick Skinner. Based on the behaviorism theory, Skinner equated learning a language to verbal behavior. Therefore, he believes that language acquisition, like any other behavior, can be observed, rather than trying to explain the mental systems underlying these types of behaviors. Skinner, as cited in Norbahira and Rajuan 2018, believes the children are born with a blank state of mind. Children acquire a first language through the stimuli given to them, and the child's response is conditioned through reinforcement. There are two types of reinforcement. The first is positive reinforcement. It helps children to enhance their mental growth and also boost their learning behavior, like giving rewards, repetitions, following through of requests and demands. Also, there are negative reinforcement. It involves steps designed to lead one to appropriate action in order to escape or avoid an unwanted consequence, like giving punishment, ignoring denial of ones. So this happens again and again until the behaviors is learned and it becomes natural and automatic. Thus, babies imitate their parents or carers and are either reprimanded or praised according to their accuracy. Next is innateness theory that proposed by Noam Chomsky. Chomsky states that children are born with an innate knowledge of language when they are born, and learning their native language is accelerated when hearing it from others. He created the Language Acquisition Device, or LAD. This LAD states that the first is babies already know about linguistic rules as they are born with an inbuilt knowledge of the language. The second is babies hear examples of their native language, which accelerates their language development. And the last is the linguistic rules help a baby make estimations and presumptions about the language it is hearing. So, from these estimations, the baby works out the language grammatical sets of rules. As more language is heard, the baby's grammar becomes more and more like adults' grammar. Next is cognitive theory that proposed by Jean Piaget. He believes a child must understand a concept before they can develop language to express it. For example, seriation and object permanence. In the seriation, there will be a point in a child's intellectual development when they can compare objects concerning the size. Thus, if you gave the child several sticks, he or she could arrange them in order of size. And for object permanence, during the first year of life, children seem unaware of the existence of objects they can see. An object which moves out of sight ceases to exist. By the time they are 18 months old, children realize that objects have an existence independently independently of their perception. Once they realize this, their language can express abstract concept. Okay, in Piaget's theory, there are stages of children acquire language. There are sensory motor stage, which is between 0 to 2 years old. In this stage, baby can differentiate between self and objects. Next is a pre-operational stage, which is between 2 to 7 years old. In this stage, children can classify objects as a single feature. Also, in this period, children think egocentrically, the emergence of motor skills and language. The development of their mental schemas lets them quickly accommodate new words and situations. From using single words, for example, milk, they begin to construct simple sentences, for example, mommy go out. And then concrete operational stage, which is between 7 to 11 years old, the children can think logically about objects and events and achieve conservation of numbers. Children's language development at this stage reveals the movement of their thinking from immature to mature and from illogical to logical. And finally, the formal operational stage. This stage begins at 11 years old and lasts into adulthood. Adolescents gain the ability to think abstractly by manipulating ideas in their minds without any dependence on concrete manipulation. Okay, the last is interaction theory that proposed by Jerome Bruner. The theory of interactionism assumes that language acquisition is the result of the interaction between the mental abilities of learning and the language environment. Bruner also coined the term Language Acquisition Support System, or LASS, in response to Chomsky's LAD. He states through LASS, parents often use books and images to develop their ability to get involved in the conversation. LASS typically involves the first is gaining attention, drawing the baby's attention to a picture. The second is query asking the baby to identify the picture. The third is label telling the baby what the object is. And the last is feedback responding to the baby's utterance. Okay, this is also called scaffolding, where the child is supported in their learning of language by carers, and once they have learned it, the support is taken away. Okay, we move to our next material. Do children learn language by imitation? But firstly, we need to know about what is imitation. According to Arja 2012, imitation is the act of copying, mimicking, or replicating behavior observed or modeled by other individuals. Imitation is a big part of childhood. At every stage, we learn something by watching, listening, and doing. Learn social rules also by imitation, learning facial expressions and body language, and, not surprisingly, a big part of language is actually learned by imitation. Before babies know the language, babies deliberately imitate facial expressions as well as the sounds, intonation, and the volume of what. Learning the pitch and contour patterns of their native language will understand individual words. Once the child becomes a toddler who can say a few words, they really ramp up their efforts to imitate. Young children need to imitate the language they are hearing around them to help them understand how the components of language all fit together and to work out what it all means. So it can be concluded that children learn language through imitation. Imitation can help children strengthen their knowledge. Most of the meaning in a language is heard in the way sounds and symbols are combined. Children learn language structures and individual words through imitation. Okay, next material is about do children learn language by reinforcement? According to behaviorism theory, children learn language by reinforcement. Skinner equated learning a language to verbal behavior. Therefore, he believes that language acquisition is observable like any other behavior. Reinforcement can increase or strengthens the behavior. For example, when the child says milk and the mother will smile and give him some as a result, the child will find this outcome rewarding, enhancing the child's language development.
Okay, the next point is about analogy. Analogy is a comparison. The main purpose of which is to explain something, can be an object, situation, idea, so on, which is complex by comparing it with something more familiar. An analogy can be just a sentence, but it can also be a paragraph. Analogies play a central role in language acquisition because children must develop from processes based on observable similarities. The general form is based on a relational analogy to obtain an abstract synthetic relationship. Then, Cantor and Smith 2012 see analogy as the essence of high-level knowledge acquisition process. Here it can be shown that it is easier to children in acquiring new structures if the construction framework is maintained continuously. And the next is about children from rules and construct a grammar. Children learn languages easily, mostly without being directly taught their rules. This process is very different from that of adults, who have a harder time learning the language even when they are directly taught the rules. Children master some fairly complicated grammar rules even before age 3, while others take them until beyond age 6. We are interested in learning about the specific order in which grammar rules are learned, why some take longer than others, and how children manage to learn them. Okay, the sixth point is about the errors and rules. There have been two important approaches to the analysis of learners' errors, namely constructive analysis and error analysis. According to Kesavers, error analysis arose as a result of the flaws in constructive analysis, which was the preferred method of describing learners' language in the 1950s and 1960s. The comparison of the learner's mother tongue and the target language is the process involved in CA. Predictions were made on errors that learners would be likely or prone to make as a result of the similarities or differences between the two languages. Unlike CA, who seeks to explain the distinction and similarities between L1 and L2, James focuses on the commonalities. The errors are systematic in the learner's basic ability. They can provide useful insight into language development. Because native speakers have almost complete mastery of their mother tongue's grammatical structure, they can quickly recognize and fix faults. Second language learners who are not native speakers not only make mistakes but also commit errors, and since they have only one rudimentary understanding of the target language, they are not always able to repair their faults. Thus, the learners' errors reflect a lack of underlying competence in the language that they are learning. Language transfer is one of the key sources of errors, according to researchers working on second language learning. However, we might note the following sources of similar errors, like interlingual interference or language transfers. Errors in this category are caused by interference from the mother tongue. Interlingual interference, this type of error arises throughout the second language learning process when the learners haven't yet fully assimilated the knowledge. Errors can also be created by the difficulty or problem with the language itself. Okay, the next presenter will be delivered by Alfie.
The next point is the acquisition of phonology, morphology, and syntax. Phonology in linguistics is one aspect that studies phonemes and sounds spoken by children from the age of 1 year, which will be seen as part of language acquisition. Phonology is study of sound in general. For example, when a child speaks, they will say something with their ability. When they want to say susu, they will say cucu. So, we as adults must train them to speak properly. The next is morphology. Morphology means the science of shape. In study of linguistics, morphology means the study of forms and word formation. Morphology study basic words, change in word form to the meaning and group of words. For example, in bahasa is makan, makan, dimakan, and etc. And then there are syntax. Syntax is putting together words into groups of words or sentence. Syntax functions are subject, predicate, object, and description. In fact, in a sentence, the four functions are not always present together. Sometimes, sentence only consists of function S and P, for example, SPO, SPK, or SPOK. However, when viewed from the nature of their present is a sentence, the four functions can be divided into parts, namely functions that are required to be present and functions that are not required to be present. The functions that are required to be present are subject, predicate, and object, while those are included in the functions that are not required to be present are description. The next is learning the meaning of words. In the acquisition of knowledge, each individual is different. Jensen told that children with high intelligence acquire vocabulary faster than children with low intelligence as more adults because they have spent a lot of more time in learning or have more knowledge of words. They are able to educate more meaning of words. Children can be trained by adults to acquire words to communicate.